Welcome to FCNYC. My name is Ben Chan. I'm here with Dominic Mauro. That means it's time to talk about MMA. We're going to start by recapping the UFC on Fox 2 card, and hopefully you stayed past the first fight, which was Chris Weidman winning a decision over Demian Maia in a fight where both fighters gassed.
Yeah, I mean, for Chris Weidman, this is very understandable. I mean, he got the fight on 11 days' notice. That means he had 10 days to drop 32 pounds to make the 186-pound limit. There was no way his gas tank was going to be normal, anything approaching normal after that. And he showed. I mean, he gassed out in the middle of the second round. He was trying to pace himself. And you know, he did a pretty good job, but his gas tank just wasn't there for the full 3-round fight. But that's okay, because Demian Maia came in with a shitty gas tank too, and with an even worse game plan. Demian Maia, one of the best grapplers at 185, one of the premier Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu fighters in MMA, period, decided to spend the whole night throwing horrible haymakers and ineffective jabs instead of using anything approaching Jiu-Jitsu. It's kind of mind-boggling. I don't know what he was thinking. I don't know why his corner didn't tell him he was losing every round. But you know, Demian Maia gave the fight away. I mean, he knew he had the fight for months. He could have trained, he could have jogged, he could have sparred with something other than cheeseburgers. I don't know what he did, but he showed up with no gas tank and no game plan, and he lost the fight to a prospect who was, you know, a pretty heavy underdog, actually. So, you know, good news for Chris Weidman, bad news for Demian Maia.
Okay, and in our next fight, there was a lot of controversy, and you actually made a prediction about one of the fighters, one Michael Bisping, who is English, and you had some things to say about his wrestling.
Well, I said it didn't exist. I said that British people couldn't wrestle, and that Chael Sonnen would just, you know, put Bisping on his back, and Bisping would spend the next 15 minutes there.
And that's exactly not what happened.
That is exactly the opposite of what happened.
Which is why we are going to drink some tea and toast Michael Bisping.
Cheerio.
Cheerio.
Michael Bisping, tea and wrestling. Nicely done, sir.
He was a 5-1 underdog.
Deservedly so. I mean, the way Chael Sonnen runs through people who can't get off of their back, and the way Michael Bisping is British, you put two and two together. You figured Chael Sonnen is going to just rampage all over Michael Bisping, and that's not what happened at all. Michael Bisping showed great counterpunching, great precision, great wrestling defense, great takedown defense. Michael Bisping put up a better fight against Chael Sonnen than Anderson Silva put up against Chael Sonnen. So, shocked. Chael Sonnen didn't look great. There's been some talk about him having a bad weight cut. You know, maybe that affected his gas tank or his stamina, or whatever the case is. Chael Sonnen barely won that fight. I scored it for Michael Bisping. I'm not the only one. UFC President Dana White also scored the fight for Bisping, but our opinions aren't the one that counts, and mine counts so much less than Dana White's. It's not even funny.
But nonetheless, Chael Sonnen goes on to fight Anderson Silva next.
Yeah, no, that's probably going to take place in Brazil over the summer. They're probably going to put it in a soccer stadium. They're probably going to sell out like 120 million seats, and everyone in Brazil is going to come and sit in the same soccer stadium and, you know, yell things at Chael Sonnen because he's smack talked all about Brazilians for, you know, years at this point. So I can't wait to see that fight. Last time Anderson Silva claims he had a broken rib and all this and all that and whatever. I'm just going to really enjoy that fight.
Oh, and where does Michael Bisping go from here?
Well, that's the funny part. Because Michael Bisping was such a huge underdog, and because so many people wrote him off completely, and he actually nearly won that fight, I think his stock only goes up, actually, from this fight. I mean, sure, he lost, but I don't think he falls very far down the rankings at all. I think maybe he has that fight with Mark Munoz like he was supposed to. I think maybe, or like Chael Sonnen was supposed to. And I think maybe, you know, he wins one more fight and he's in line for a title shot. I mean, I don't see him falling very far down the rankings at all.
Mm-hmm. And then in the main event, we had what amounted to be a tune-up fight for Rashad Evans.
Yeah, this fight really didn't do much other than show that Rashad Evans is top dog at 205. We knew going in that Phil Davis was probably going to be outmatched, and he was in just about every part of the fight. I mean, he looked very intimidated by Rashad on the feet, and he looked overmatched on the ground. I mean, he got put in a mounted crucifix a couple of times. And, you know, for a great wrestler like Davis, you don't expect that, but Evans made him look, you know, positively green on the ground, and like he had no business being in the ring with him on the feet. He landed, you know, several fantastic punches. I mean, he was all over Davis for 25 straight minutes. About the only thing that went well for Davis was showing that he could hang in there for 25 full minutes with a guy of Rashad's caliber. I mean, he's got a really good chin. He's got heart. You know, he's durable. He avoided getting in too much trouble. But the result was a fight that was never close. Yeah, Davis just had no shot.
And so now Evans goes on to fight Jon Jones. The fight has been scheduled for April, and the odds came out, and they have Evans as a 6-1 underdog.
Yeah, this is a little bit much. I mean, you know, Jon Jones rightfully should be the favorite. I mean, he's just torn through the division, and he finishes all his fights and all this and all that. And Jon Jones has a lot going for him. But Rashad Evans is a really good fighter. I mean, Rashad Evans, has some advantages over Jon Jones. He could be the underdog, but not a 6-1 underdog. I mean, Rashad Evans is faster than Jon Jones. Rashad Evans is much more experienced than Jon Jones, and Rashad Evans, he's arguably the better wrestler than Jon Jones. Jones didn't really have much of a college career worth talking about in wrestling, so we don't have an awful lot of proof of Jon Jones doing the straight wrestling thing, but he looks damn good in the UFC, throwing people to the ground and elbowing them a bunch of times. But Rashad's got tools to win that fight, and we're going to talk about this, plenty of times before the fight actually happens. But 6-1, come on.
Okay, and next up, we're going to talk about the UFC 143, which is this weekend. It's a pay-per-view card on Saturday, and we're going to start by talking about the Renan Barão versus Scott Jorgensen fight.
Yeah, this one's going to be pretty fun. Renan Barão, he's a really exciting young prospect in the bantamweight division. He trains with Jose Aldo, who's the champion of the featherweight division, and has really adopted a lot of his fighting style. I mean, good jab, fantastic leg kicks, keeps the distance. Although he really likes the ground and pound, so he's an exciting fighter. He's coming off of a really hilarious early stoppage over what's his name, Drew Fickett, something in England. Looks really good, and he's fighting Scott Jorgensen, who's on a great winning streak. He's won 7 out of his last 8 fights, only exception being losing to Dominic, the champion at 135. Jorgensen's a great wrestler. He's very powerful for a guy who's like this tall or something. It's going to be a really exciting fight. I don't think that Barão is going to get to put Jorgensen on his back, but it would be really interesting to see if Jorgensen can put Barão on his back. They both like to ground and pound, and we'll see whose ground is poundier, I guess.
Okay, and then the next fight, we have a gatekeeper versus a prospect. We have Josh Koscheck versus Mike Pierce.
Yeah, this fight is Josh Koscheck's, 40th, 50th, something like that in the UFC. I mean, he's been around forever, and he's durable, and he fights all the time. But he's a gatekeeper. I mean, GSP's beaten him resoundingly twice by now. The last time it wasn't even close. Koscheck is definitely a gatekeeper at 170, and Mike Pierce has a lot of the same skill sets as Josh Koscheck. I mean, they're both college wrestlers who've integrated striking into their game pretty well. Not a lot of head movements. They have very overlapping skill sets, and Pierce hasn't really done anything to distinguish himself, but he has beaten a bunch of guys down in the lower tranches of the 170-pound division, so give him a shot against the gatekeeper. That's what the gatekeeper's there for. And this could be a case of Josh Koscheck sort of interviewing his replacement for when he's done at 170 or with fighting in general. I mean, maybe Pierce is the new Koscheck.
And then in the next fight after that, we have 2 heavyweight grapplers matching up. We have Roy Nelson versus Fabricio Verdun.
Yeah, I'm actually really excited for this fight because these are 2 top 3 Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu grapplers at heavyweight. Roy Nelson, body double for Santa Claus, but with a mullet. One of the most, easily recognized fighters in the UFC. He's just deceptively quick on the ground for a guy with a bowl full of jelly. He's a great grappler with surprisingly good hands. I mean, for a guy who probably ought to be fighting at light heavyweight or maybe even middleweight, he hits hard, and he has a fantastic chin. I mean, 7 or 8 of them actually, but he's really good on the ground, and that's why I'm positive that we're never going to see him fight on the ground against Fabricio Verdun, because when you have 2 grapplers, they always have a shitty kickboxing match. Fabricio Verdun, another one of the most skilled Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu guys at heavyweight. His last fight against Alistair Overeem kind of showed the weakness of being really good at Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu if you're not good at wrestling. I mean, Verdun just flopped to the ground every time Overeem came near him because, nobody wants to get kicked by Overeem. So Verdun just sort of had to beg Overeem to follow him to the ground and try some grappling, and, that tactic's not going to work against a guy like Overeem. His tactic's probably not going to work against a guy like Roy Nelson, because Nelson, his striking's not Overeem-esque, but it's much better than Verdum. So I think Roy Nelson wants to keep this fight standing and, well, show off his handiwork, and that it's not just, for pounding down food.
And then in the main event of the fight of the night, we have a fight for the #1 welterweight contendership between Nick Diaz and Carlos Condit.
Yeah, this is the winner of this fight is going to be crowned interim welterweight champion, which is really just like a super official version of #1 contender, because it comes with a shiny belt that just says interim on it in Sharpie or something. This fight's fantastic. Fight of the night written all over it, maybe fight of the year candidate, and I can't wait. Nick Diaz. What do you even say? I mean, volume puncher. He just throws hundreds of punches at you. He's never going to stop throwing punches. Great grappling. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt with Cesar Gracie. He's got cardio for days. I mean, he runs triathlons for fun in his spare time.
And I watch triathlons for fun.
I can't even watch them. I pass out doing that. My cardio is that bad. So Nick Diaz, fantastic fighter, and he's fighting Carlos Condit, who not quite a volume puncher, but just deadly striker, killer instinct. I mean, flying knees, elbows, punch. I mean, he's got great timing with all his strikes, great power, probably more power than Diaz. I mean, you got the volume puncher over the power puncher. It's a great matchup. Carlos Condit also very good on the ground. I think these guys are evenly matched everywhere the fight could conceivably go, and they just fast-paced fighters, high tempo. It's going to be a thrilling fight. I have no idea who's going to win at all, but I can't wait to find out.
So UFC 143 this Saturday on ESPN pay-per-view, and George St. Pierre waits in the wings.
Yes, can't wait for that too.
Thanks for watching, and we'll be back with boxing next.